Awesome. Thank you all for joining us today. So quick, just housekeeping things before we get started. For Zoom, if you're not muted, go ahead and mute yourself already. And for your camera, no need to have them on. Parrish and I are going to be going over this PowerPoint slide deck about consulting in tech. And with that, there is the top bar. You should see kind of the row of names for our faces. If you have the option to show small active speaker video, it should be a little box symbol. If you go ahead and click that, that'll shift between Parrish and I when we're speaking and talking about our slides. It'll just make it a little bit easier to follow whose face is talking. So feel free to do that. But with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, thank you all for joining us. We're really excited to launch this STEM summer series. My name is Paul Flournoy, and I'm joined by my colleague, Parrish Patel. And so today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit about consulting in tech and the differences between the two, and with some similarities as well. So Parrish?
Thanks, Paul. So we will start by covering the agenda of our talking points for today. So we'll start out by just generally describing what consulting and tech are and what falls under those larger umbrella categories. Then we'll shift to tactical ways that you can position yourself this summer, so specific activities that you can engage in so you're well prepped for fall recruitment. We'll also discuss a system for tracking your career search progress. Then we'll identify similarities and then also point out differences between the two. And then we'll wrap up just with some closing remarks, and that will also be an opportunity to do question and answer.
Awesome. Thank you, Parrish. So first, we're going to jump into what is consulting. So consulting generally is finding there's a problem within a company or a firm that they need solved, right? So they reach out to a consulting firm to send a team of consultants to come in, shed some advice, also figure out how do we solve this problem, right? So consulting, you've got diverse project work. With that, we do want to demyth that, generally when you think of consulting, the first thing that comes to mind is management consulting and thinking about that structure, strategy, critical thinking, Wall Street type job, right? We're here to tell you that there are different types of consulting. So within that, you have management, but then you also have life sciences, you have healthcare, you have tech consulting. And so what that means is you're just going to different companies in different industries and solving those problems, giving some advice. And then also as a consultant, you're there to start implementing those next step plans, right? So making sure the transition goes smoothly. So with that, you have both hard and soft skills. You're going to be working with people and you have to have those interpersonal skills, but at the same time, you're going to have the critical thinking and you're going to have the hard skills as well. We'll talk a little bit more about what skills go into consulting as well as tech later on in this presentation. But again, problem solving is huge for the consulting world, and with that, the different types of consulting, right? So going in, making sure that you're able to identify the problem, and then work with your team to figure out what's the best solution for this. How can we best help this company in the most effective and in both time and cost-effective manner.
So tech, I feel, is often thought of as the larger tech companies or the big four. So Apple, Amazon, Google, and Facebook. And they're certainly kind of the top, probably regarded companies in the industry. But I generally describe tech as kind of three categories. So big tech, so those larger companies that we're all familiar with. Non-traditional tech is essentially tech roles for companies that aren't traditionally a tech company. So for example, that could be in a financial institution doing a fintech type of role. It could be for a retail company like sports retail. Let's say you work for Under Armour, but as a software engineer, building their web applications, mobile apps, things like that. And then there are also startups, which are very wide ranging. So that could be tied to a very particular type of R&D, so like biotech, or it could be a traditional tech startup. It's like a mobile application, things like that. So I think thinking about it in these three categories can be helpful just to get a sense of which one appeals to you the most, or if you're interested in all three, that can just help inform how you go about your search process. So categorizing them into these three buckets. And then you can maybe even prioritize once you get a sense of these. Like, I think I want to focus on big tech and doing that company research early on, and then maybe shifting to the other two. For startups, there can be more flexibility in terms of recruitment. They usually don't recruit quite as aggressively or early into an academic year as big tech would. So those are some distinctions to be aware of. So in terms of just the categories, once you're interested in these firms, software engineering is the most common role or the entry path, especially for students that have studied CS, computer engineering, or even other engineering disciplines too. Product management is a unique one that I think could be a really great opportunity, especially if you're thinking about consulting as well, because essentially what product management is bringing ideas into reality. What the role looks like can vary from company to company quite a bit, but generally speaking, it could be leading an effort to launch a new feature, a new product, a new surface. And as a product manager, you typically work with a cross-functional team. So it could include folks from marketing, some from the software development side, some from business development. So it's a great way to kind of combine a technical background, but in more of a people-facing management leadership type of role. And then there's also UI UX for students that are really interested in maybe the more creative side or design. That can also be a great path.
Awesome. So I know the big question right now is, what can I be doing, right? So some places have hiring freezes. It might be late. I haven't started looking for an internship or job. Everything's frozen. I'm stuck at home. There are some things that you can do so that you have a productive summer still. And so those three things are going to be company research, networking and outreach, and skills development. So we'll dive deeper in all of these three later on, but I just want to touch on all three right now. Company research, right? So you want to make sure you read the websites, you go through, you figure out what it is they do, right? So with that, that means figuring out where your interest lies within that company. So when you're networking and you're reaching out, one of the things you can talk about is, when I was looking through your website, something that really caught my eye was this. That shows that you took the time to figure out what it is they do. Also, you took the time to figure out where your interests, where your skills lie within that company. Kind of an informal, I'm able to make an impact for you all through this. And I want to hear about what you're doing right now. I want to hear about what's going on with the larger company as it relates to this interest of mine. So that goes to networking and outreach. Who are we reaching out to? There's kind of a 3-layer approach. I call it the onion approach, right? So there's different layers. You peel it back. So starting with family, friends, and peers. So those who are closest to you, right? So it could be your neighbor down the street. It could be mom or dad. It could be aunt or uncle. Somebody within your personal network that you know of that either has a connection to a company or an industry that you can reach out to learn more about what it is. And try to find more contacts within that area. Then you're going to go to Vandy alumni. So this is going to be one step lower. Your real connection is just going to be that shared experience at Vanderbilt. Obviously, as time has progressed, people who graduated in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, their experience might have been a little bit different, but those are still key people that we want to reach out to and keep in mind, right? So people who we're going to reach out to where we're able to connect about your experience at Vanderbilt, maybe some clubs you're involved in, that actually helps with conversation, right? So you might not know them personally, but you're still able to have share some sentiments with them about that experience. And then there's just industry professionals as a whole. These are often referred to as cold outreach, and that's okay. Will the rate of response be a little bit lower? Yes. But the thing is, the lower rate means those who do reach back out and respond to that initial outreach email, they really want to help you. So building that relationship is a little bit easier, and connecting with what their interests are a little bit better. right? And so the stronger you make that relationship, the better it's going to be. So whether that's in a mentor role, or maybe that's just they help connect you with other people within the company. But that's still an avenue that I know kind of has an intimidating factor to it, but it's still an avenue that's worth exploring. And again, we'll talk about that later on. Last is going to be skills development. So with that, it's really looking at what skills you currently have, what skills you want to improve on, or what skills you want to find. So later on, we'll talk about programming languages, right? So maybe it's you want to learn a new language. Maybe it's you want to brush up on a language you learned last year or 2 years ago. Or maybe it's just focusing on your strengths, focusing on what skills you have and just improving those a little bit more.
So that first category, company research, the bullet pointed lists are just a variety of resources that you could utilize to engage in the company research process. So that could be tricky thinking of that. It's like, what is company research? So it really boils down to understanding the market. And then once you have an idea of the market, then the companies that fall into that market. So the image there on the right is from a resource called Vault. It's just vault.com. It's a professional development site, career search platform. The unique thing about Vault is they do a lot of career guides that are specific to industries. So consulting is one. These are paid resources, but you have free access as a Vanderbilt student. So we definitely recommend create an account. Even if you're not using it all the time, it's definitely worth browsing as you're engaging in kind of company research and just looking for opportunities. So just be sure to use your Vanderbilt email address, and then you'll be able to prompt through the registration process. So what you see there is consulting, specifically management consulting. But as you see above and below, it gets much more granular in terms of all these different subcategories within consulting. So, management consulting is a great start. So these large firms, so 1, 2, and 3, those who've been looking into consulting might be able to guess who those are. It's McKinsey, Bain, Boston Consulting Group. But as you go down the list, that can be helpful as well, because it might open up firms or companies that weren't already on your radar, or in some cases, companies that you weren't familiar with. And then the next step in the workflow, it could be going to their site and just learning a little bit more about them. Are they US based? Are they global? What did their internship programs look like historically? Is there any information about timelines? And those types of key data points can be very valuable as you kind of build a plan to apply to opportunities, network for opportunities moving forward. Glassdoor is another really good one. It allows employers or candidates who have interviewed at companies to leave feedback. So sometimes you could get some helpful insights about what an interview process might look like. We always say, though, with Glassdoor, take it with a grain of salt. Oftentimes these reviews are anonymous, but they could be a good just general reflection. And there's also information about salary. So for any seniors that we may have, or those going into their senior year, that could be a good one too, when you potentially consider full-time offers, just to get a sense of what does the market rate look like? How does this company compare from another company? Indeed is another fairly large career search platform, similar to Glassdoor in that it's got insights about companies, interviewing, things like that. Reddit is another good one. Reddit, similar to Glassdoor, take it with a grain of salt in terms of the feedback on there. But sometimes there could be very helpful resources or feedback from people who have engaged in an internship, the interview process, full-time roles. Some people will even point out helpful resources on Reddit, so it could be worth browsing. Next, company career site. So that's just the idea of going directly to the company site. So Accenture is highlighted. So thinking, okay, what is Accenture? Within management consulting, they actually also offer tech consulting. So that could be something you learn as you're browsing the site. And most of these large companies will actually have university-specific sites that you can navigate to once you're on their normal job site, and it will be targeting university students and recent graduates. So definitely recommend checking those out. In some cases, I know Microsoft does a good job with this. They will even have insights from recruiters or current engineers or consultants that are helpful around things like networking or navigating interviewing. So what better place to get those insights than people within the organization? Something Paul and I say often is, how can you reverse engineer the paths of people that are already at these companies? And that's what networking can help you do. So then we've also got Doorways, which is the Career Center's career search platform. That could be good to learn about not only just open opportunities like internships and jobs, but also information sessions. So like today, our session today would be categorized as a career center event. There's also a tab for employer event. So that's when a company can come in and send representatives to talk about the company and opportunities they offer. And we're very fortunate, even through the COVID-19 period, we're still very engaged with our employers. So they're working with us to do sessions just like this through Zoom and other video conferencing platforms. So it could be worth browsing periodically just to get a sense of, hey, what's coming up in the next few weeks? If anything sounds interesting, you could just go ahead and copy and paste it to your calendar or import it to your calendar. Another kind of creative one is YouTube. It could be helpful to find day in the life videos, like day in the life of a software engineer at Dropbox, things like that. If you search, there are lots of people that have kind of vlogged their experience. In some cases, there are even YouTubers that just kind of chronicle their experience pursuing these industries. So those could be helpful too, just to get a sense of what it looked like for these individuals, especially those that have maybe been there for a couple years, so they can speak to the cultures of the companies they were at, what they found to be successful, things they might have done differently earlier on in the process.
Awesome. So thinking about networking and outreach, right? So we talked about the different layers that you can reach out to, but what do you say? How do we form an email that we can reach out to these people to where it would grab their attention and we're going to get a response, right? So this is a very effective message that we have drafted out for you. Feel free to take notes, write it down exactly how it is, and just formulate it to your own experience. But basically, if I was sending a note to Parrish, I would say something like, "Hi Parrish, my name is Paul. I'm a rising junior at Vanderbilt University, currently majoring in computer science. I'm reaching out because I have an interest in front-end development and aspire to pursue a career similar to yours. I would love to hear about your experience working in the tech industry. Would you be open to a brief call for maybe 15 to 20 minutes with me? Thank you in advance for your consideration. Best, Paul." So what are some key points here? So I outlined who I am, what I'm studying, like the whole picture, right? So present. Why am I reaching out? Why does Parrish want to see an email from me? What do I want out of Parrish? It's that 15 to 20 minute brief call. That's going to be just learning about their experience working in the tech industry, and that I have an interest in front-end development. And the call to action, the question why, is going to be that brief phone call, and that's going to be 15 to 20 minutes. Reason we have it being that short amount of time is because if somebody sees a 30-minute slot in their day, they're able to put 15 to 20 minutes on their calendar and have it not feel too squished, too tight in their day. If you were to ask for 30 minutes, that's fine as well. But with 15 to 20 minutes, it's a perfect sweet spot time. With that also, we found that at the end of the 15 or 20 minutes, it's always respectful to pause, and even if you have more questions, say, I recognize I only asked for 15 to 20 minutes, and I want to be mindful of your time. But if you do have a little bit longer, we can stay on the phone. I have a few more questions I was hoping to ask. They might say, yeah, definitely more than happy to stay on the phone. I got nothing. If they do say, yeah, I got to hop off, but it's been really nice talking to you, there's a chance you can slide in there. Well, I would appreciate the opportunity to talk with you later this week, or maybe next week, more time. Or would it be appropriate to shoot you the questions that I have, right? So just try to stay on top of answering all the questions, or asking all the questions that you have. But also, you don't want to be too pushy. You don't want to say, oh, but please, I just one or two more questions, right? So you want to be mindful of their time. So what happens if they don't respond? No, they don't respond. We like to say 10 to 14 days pass without hearing back. You can send them a short, polite message, something like it's drafted up here. I'm sure you've been quite busy. Just wanted to check in, circle back with you. I would still value the opportunity to chat with you if you have some spare time. Thank you. just that brief, right? So what that does is you're responding to that original message. And so when they see this, all they have to do is scroll down and see your original message. So there's a chance they didn't respond because maybe you sent it over the weekend and they got 20 emails after yours and they just didn't get to it. The best time to send an email, we like to say, is 9 a.m. on a Monday because they're online, they're checking their email, and that's going to be top of their box at the beginning of the week, and they'll definitely see it. So being strategic with when you're sending these outreach emails also play into effect when we're trying to hear back. Yeah.
One other thing too on this one, Paul, something else that we wanted to emphasize, if you'll notice in the message what you don't see. So a couple of things, no mention of internship or job posting. So we did this on purpose, and it's something we recommend generally. We find that if you leave out, hey, I'm interested in the internship program at Google, or I'm hoping to be an associate consultant at your company, when somebody sees it, their first instinct is, Paul's reaching out to me because he views me as a bridge to my company. And in some cases, people will still be happy to help, but in others, their mind immediately thinks this is transactional, and they might be somewhat less inclined to engage. So by leaving it out and approaching it from an angle of curiosity, we find that the response rate is higher. In our experience with students we've worked with, and even personally as we've networked ourselves kind of earlier on in our career. So kind of a small thing to keep in mind, just like that subtle touch of adding 15 to 20 minutes. That just shows instead of saying brief call, you're being very specific. So another kind of caveat is thinking, how can I make this as easy as possible for them to say yes? So what some students might do is think, oh, I should tell them all about my skills, my experiences, and almost write a cover letter. But we recommend keeping it to around 5 sentences. Use the call as more of an opportunity to maybe share a little bit more about you. What you want to achieve with a message is just explain the key points, who you are, why you're reaching out, the call to action, and then engage in a call. And we know a call does sound intimidating, but trust us, it could be very beneficial because it's more dynamic and you'll be more memorable if you speak to them on the phone versus doing an email exchange.
Yeah, great point, Paris. Thank you. And one thing in addition to that as well, a big question that we get is, should I attach my resume then, right? Should I just attach it to the document and then they can look at it? We recommend not. They will ask for your resume if it gets to that point and when appropriate. So just let them take the lead on that. And if you have a few conversations and the relationship develops and you do end up talking about a position that you're interested in, they will say, oh, yeah, send over your resume and I'll take a look at it or I'll forward it to the hiring manager. So let them take the lead on that. And what you're taking the lead on is just that relationship and that back and forth open communication.
Okay, so skills development, that was that third activity to engage in over the summer. So if you're interested in both of these categories, it could be helpful just to recalibrate as you shift from consulting to tech. There are similarities, of course, but there will also be many differences too, especially regarding skills. So one of those is technical skills, right? So for consulting on the analytical skills sides, it will be more so Excel and PowerPoint. So then, okay, you have these two, and it's like, well, I've used Excel, I've used PowerPoint, I use them regularly as a student, but what we would encourage you is, what's that next step? How specifically is Excel applied in a consulting role? So how to figure that out. So one is doing that company research. Another is networking and that idea of kind of deconstructing the career path of somebody that's there, asking their perspective. Other is those consulting guides like Vault, for example. We've also got our resource link there. That's just on the Vanderbilt Career Center site on industry pages. So feel free to check that out. We've got some more information about case prep because that's very unique to consulting. It's part of the interview process. It's something that we definitely recommend if you have some spare time over the summer to begin familiarizing yourself, especially coming from a STEM background. It's not that it will just be difficult necessarily. It's just differences in terminology. So getting a sense of what is cost of goods sold, or how does ROI apply for this type of business problem? What are key forces like social forces, market forces that you would assess for a business case? It's just getting a sense of those different terms and how to apply them appropriately. On the tech side, similar. So for programming languages, sometimes we get asked, like, what languages should I focus on? So we always say, what industry, what companies are you interested in? And then an activity I often do is even for full-time positions. So if you're a first-year student, sophomore, that might seem a bit premature, but it's not just for the sense of applying by any means. It's more just saying, what is the market looking for? So for example, if you were to Google software engineer position at Microsoft, I always say jump to key eligibility criteria. So minimum qualifications and preferred, even if it's a full-time role, and just copy and paste those into your spreadsheet. Then you have a sense. That's not to say I need to learn all of these things, but as you find patterns, Microsoft versus Google versus Airbnb, then you're going to get a sense that, you know what, I'm noticing that these two languages seem to be predominant, or there seems to be an increase in machine learning applications, cloud computing, and that could inform technical skills that you pursue over the summer. And it doesn't have to be technical skills in the form of formal classes. It could be YouTube tutorials, open source e-learning platforms that are out there. We've got some recommendations on that. We could talk with you more individually on that, but there's several out there. And then again, on case prep, there in addition to guides, there are also specific books and things. Same on tech. A common book you will hear is Cracking the Coding Interview. We can say that we've seen it be successful from students we've worked with, so that's a resource, but there are also just free resources as well online. Another thing too is project work. We don't have that called out specifically, but project work on the consulting side, it could be thinking creatively. So maybe you have a couple of friends that are also interested in consulting. That could be identifying a company you're interested in, and maybe you've observed a problem that they're facing from news or just from things that you've read online, kind of public opinion. You could work with your friends to design a recommendation. So almost treating it as a case for yourself. And that could be a personal project to include on a resume, or that could be kind of a polished talking point for you. It's like, hey, Paul, how did you approach last summer? Oh, well, I'm really interested in management consulting. So I identified a company of interest, determined a business problem they're facing, and I worked with two peers to come up with 3 recommendations. That's a really polished way to kind of approach somebody in a recruiting role and say, wow, that's really proactive and professional. On the tech side, it could be in the form of web development, app development. Let's say you're into gaming, it could be like game design. So there's a lot of variety in terms of how you could do project work, but the basic value of it is it gives you something tangible to speak to in an interview setting. So you're not just saying that, well, I've taken these classes. You're saying, hey, I've used these skills from classes and that are tied to the industry to build things, or to apply these skills to problems in society, or to build my own kind of technical project.
Yeah, great point there. So we gave you a lot to do. You have found 30 people you want to reach out to, and you do that, right? How do you stay organized? We recommend you use like an Excel sheet breakdown. And so this is just one example on how you can track your progress. And so pick and choose what's right for you. Everybody's sheet's going to look different. But here we have company name, category, so what industry, what area, their website. So, you know, what roles do they have open? They're going to have, you know, join our team on their page. So adding that link could be beneficial for you. Key skills and experience. So going back to what Paris was saying, reading through the documents and pulling out what skills or experiences they're looking for, and just keeping track of that, right? The next is going to be, do you have any contacts? Do you have any networks there? Maybe you add their email, maybe you add, if you have their phone number, add that as well. Again, whatever works for you. Date contacted, follow-up date. Adding dates could be really beneficial, just so you can look back in your records and not having to go back to your email and say, oh gosh, I know their name was Steve, but I can't remember when I reached out and what I said. So just having on this Excel sheet when you reached out is beneficial as well. How did you reach out to them? Maybe it was the VU alumni directory. Maybe it was LinkedIn. Maybe you found their email through CareerShift, right? So how did you find that email? How did you reach out? Was it a friend that gave you that email? One of your peer networks? And then some key call notes. This can be really, really wide in terms of what information you put in here. You can treat this as what advice did they give in terms of, did they tell you to read a book, listen to a podcast, what follow-up, just notes, what did you guys talk about? Maybe it is, did you like it or not? Yes or no. Maybe it's, this is what I got out of it. This is what's beneficial to me. Maybe it's my interest shifted. Really anything. It could be a lot of different things. Again, up to you. And then thank you message date. Always, always, always send a thank you note within 24 hours after contacting somebody and jumping on the phone, right? That could be really short. Hey, Steve, really appreciated our conversation. I really got a lot out of it. And in there, you can say specifically what it was that you got out of it. Just say, I'm going to take a look at that book, or I'm going to listen to that podcast. Have a great rest of your week. That's it. That short, that brief, just to let them know that you appreciate them and their time that they took out for you, even if it was 15, 20 minutes. And then a date, just so that keeps you accountable for when you did it. So again, this can be kind of mix and match to your own interests and your own, how you think through things, right? So one thing that I like to do is, for the category, I don't have a specific column for it, but I have different pages for different industries. And so with that, you can have a management consulting page and then a tech page. So that way you flip back and forth. And that might be how that works for you. So you see the drop down arrows on the first row. That is just adding a filter so you can sort through it very easily. That is something you can do through Excel. If you don't know how to do it, I'm more than happy to show you. Feel free to reach out. But otherwise, if you do, it's very, very beneficial to have on there.
Okay, so some similarities and differences, and these lists could be much longer. These are just a few key ones that we wanted to identify between consulting and tech. So the first is problem solving. Both allow for kind of a challenging environment. It's just the application of the problem solving is what looks different. So is it problem solving for business related issues? And even in that, you could go much deeper, right? Because life sciences consulting problem solving would look different than management consulting, tech consulting. For software engineering, there's problem solving too, but the application is applied to web dev or mobile. If you do back end stuff or front end stuff. So problem solving is just kind of a common thread in both. Same data driven. And again, the data and the insights are just different. From consulting, the data could be related to staff. It could be related to market. It could be related to sales. In tech, the data is going to be related maybe to usage of users of a certain application, or if the tech that you do is kind of tied to driving people to a site. So again, these are kind of common. It's just the application that looks different. And then that's a quote that we pulled. It was actually describing consulting, but it can be true of tech as well. So the idea that you're highly challenging and highly compensated. And that's what's make these two very appealing, right? The opportunity to work in a challenging environment, push yourself, but also you're compensated well for it. Then some differences. So work-life balance, as you dig more into these two, I think it'll unearth kind of more of these differences. And again, this can vary. So take this with a grain of salt, but generally speaking, consulting hours can tend to be higher. One reason for that is travel related. That may look different given what's going on now. It's unlikely that consultants are traveling out to business sites. It's probably being done virtually, but kind of pre-coronavirus, it's not uncommon for some consultants to travel every week for several weeks in a row. Usually a travel schedule is leaving on Sunday evening and returning on Thursday. And in that time, you're on site to assist your client and kind of assess any data and work with partners at the business to kind of collaboratively come up with a solution. So the hours tend to be higher because of that. Where on the other hand, tech, in some cases, the hours might be equal too, but there's not always the same amount of travel. Another difference is tech typically lends itself more favorably to remote work. So if something like what's going on is happening now, it's easy for tech companies to kind of transition to work from home, because in some cases they had work from home policies in place already, or they just had more flexibility around work schedules. So that's something to keep in mind if you would prefer maybe that flexibility in terms of how you balance kind of work and personal life. Another difference is the variety of projects. So for consulting, there can be a little bit more variety dependent on the clients you get. So, perhaps you start with a client that's in the oil and gas industry, and then you move to a healthcare client, and then maybe another kind of sector. So that could help keep things a little bit interesting and dynamic. And maybe on the tech side, you work, especially for a very large tech company, usually you're assigned to very specific teams. So the work you do, maybe the projects change and shift, but it's still tied to specific products or features. So in some cases, it may look a little bit more consistent. So something to keep in mind if you do like the variety. But another thing to point out there is if you do software engineering, maybe in a startup environment, then there could be variety just because of the growth phase the startups in. So these things can be different even in terms of the scope within tech or within consulting. And that last point, career development. In consulting, what sometimes happens for folks in that industry is they use it as, a world-class learning opportunity. What better place to learn how to kind of look into problems and come up with solutions at top consulting firms. But then some folks will try to formulate an exit strategy. They might say, I've really enjoyed this. I've gained a lot of skills, but now I want to apply them maybe to my own business. I want to go into entrepreneurship, or maybe I want to focus on a very specific sector. So let's say you're a management consultant, but your favorite clients were healthcare. So you want to shift to maybe a healthcare role, or maybe you want to transition from the consultant side to the organization side. So you want to be a business leader within healthcare or within technology. And then in some cases, there's graduate school. So consultants might want to pursue something like an MBA, or if they really like the technical nature of the work and want to lean into that, they might pursue a degree in data analytics. Tech, there's definitely opportunities in graduate school too, maybe pursuing a master's or something a little bit more niche within tech. Or if you go in the product management or software engineering, but you find that you don't necessarily want to do coding day in, day out, maybe you want to move into management or leadership, maybe pursuing a degree in that's something business related to just gain some more leadership skills.
So again, these are just closing thoughts. You don't know what to pursue, you're able to pursue both. So what that means is consulting recruiting timeline. Most of you might know this, but it's in the fall semester. So it's going to be August to about December, where it's really heavy on the front end. So like August, September, October, those are going to be heavy recruiting months. Where tech, it starts in fall, and you could definitely get hired in the fall and go through the recruiting process. That also continues on into early spring semester. And then especially if you're looking at startups, that's going to track all the way down to May. So tech really recruits year round. You can find positions open all the way from August until May. But with startups starting in mid to late spring semester, you really have time to explore both avenues. It's up to you. And so if you really don't know consulting tech, don't know which route to take, prepare for both. Think about both. There's no reason why you should choose. With that, we'll meet you halfway. And so even if you're unsure and you don't think one on top of the other, you don't really know, we're here to help you as well. We're here to have these conversations. So schedule a coaching appointment. We can talk about an individualized plan to pursue both, one, neither, up to y'all. But we're really here to help you and help talk through this, this decision for you. And it's not a decision, again, that you have to make right now or this summer. Just think about both, explore new areas as well. And Parrish, any additional thoughts that I'm missing?
Yeah, I would just kind of echo what you said, Paul. I know this was a lot of ground in a short amount of time. So, if you want to do a deeper dive into networking, maybe that's new territory for you and you find it a little bit intimidating, which we definitely understand. It was for us too, and we were kind of learning it and how to engage in it. Let us know. We could always do one-on-one appointments. We could talk about a plan, what it looks like. Same with the resources. If you're like, okay, you gave us some ideas about company research, but now how do I apply it? We can help you get started. And then another one is just that idea of, even after today's session, it's not meant for you to pursue one, the other, or even both. It's just an opportunity to shed some light on both of them, and to mention that it is possible to pursue both. We've worked with students that have pursued both, but if you're still not sure, let us know. We another phrase we say is, we meet you where you are, like Paul mentioned. So even if it's like, I appreciate the insights, but I'm not sure what's right for me, let us know, and we could start on the front end. Or if you're like, I want to work at Microsoft, that is my company, how can I get there? We could work with you on that too. So regardless of where you're at in the spectrum of the search process, we're around. We do one-on-one coaching appointments during the course of semesters. We do drop-ins, or if you have a quick question. We could also help with resumes, with interviewing. If you have a networking call coming up and maybe you just want to practice, let us know. We'd love to just simulate that, what it looks like, asking questions, that type of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And this presentation was meant to be more informational, and just kind of to get the thoughts going, just to start thinking about what we can do, right? So summer's just beginning. What are some ways that you can be productive this summer? We've outlined that. So next steps, we would hope that you all would schedule a coaching appointment. I mean, it's not mandatory, but again, to really maximize the information that we talked about today and to have that individualized support and plan. We really look forward to seeing a coaching appointment come up, and you can do that through doorways. But for now, we will open it up to questions if you all want. We'll also stay on this Zoom call for a few minutes after, if there are no questions, if you just want to ask with a smaller group, or feel free to send an email as well. And here
you can also use chat too, if you'd like to kind of message your question to us.
Yep, and there you can send a chat privately. So when you're going to send a chat, you can send it either Parrish, myself, or do it to a large group. Here is the schedule for the remainder of our STEM summer series. Feel free to add these dates to your calendar if these areas are interesting to you. And we hope to talk to you all soon. Looks like chat. Okay, we have a question. So, are most tech and consulting internships for upperclassmen?
Good question. So usually how we explain this is, for larger companies, they tend to prioritize upper class students, which I know can be frustrating and a bit of a barrier. But more of these companies are launching first and second year student specific programs. One example on the tech side is Microsoft's Explore program. They specifically target first and second year students. So that's where the research can help as well. So as you're learning about these companies, maybe they do have, an early college program that's a right fit for you. But generally speaking, the larger the company, the more priority there is for upper class. But they will say that they're willing to take students that are first year and second year if it's a good fit. So that shouldn't discourage you from applying. Networking can also be helpful too, because it gives you that chance to interact with somebody there. And if they get the sense from a couple of phone calls that you're the right fit, then you have somebody that can speak on your behalf to a hiring team. So you kind of shift from one of many, many applicants who's perhaps a little less experienced to somebody that's got, a relationship with somebody there. So there are ways to overcome it. So yeah, long-winded answer. Generally speaking, juniors tend to be prioritized for larger companies, but there are sophomore, first year specific programs out there.
On top of that, definitely explore the avenue of kind of an informal internship for the summer. So with having those networking outreach conversations, as that relationship builds, you might feel comfortable to ask. I recognize that these internships that are being posted this summer are for juniors, maybe seniors, but I'm really interested in this part and in what you're doing here. Is there any way that I can be involved or help with some project work on the side throughout the course of the next few months or over the course of the summer. And that way you get your foot in the door. Again, you have that person to vouch for you, like Paris mentioned, and you show that you're willing, you really want to be involved in any capacity. We've seen that goes a long way as well.
Another kind of creative way to learn about years that companies are prioritizing or that they're actually selecting, so learning the outcomes, is using LinkedIn and getting creative. So one example, let's say you're really interested in Microsoft's Explorer program. You can just search Microsoft Explorer and see who pops up, and profiles will come up from students that have probably done it. And then you could reach out, even if they're not Vanderbilt. Like Paul mentioned, the outreach is very consistent, whether it's a Vanderbilt alumni or not. You just remove maybe a sentence that says, oh, I see you're a Vanderbilt alumni. But you can reach out and say, hey, I see you did the Microsoft Explorer program. That's really interesting. Would love to hear your thoughts about it. I'm considering applying. And maybe by talking with them, you learn a little bit more about it. And they might even say, well, you know what, Paul, if you'd like, I'm still in touch with my old supervisor and I can connect the two. Things like that can be very beneficial. And that's an example of an early career specific program. But let's say it's a different company that says, we're open to any level. But if you search them and you see several people on LinkedIn that did it their sophomore year, that's a good indication for you that it's probably worth the application process. So there are kind of creative ways to go about it too. So if you have more questions around that, we'd love to kind of work with you individually and come up with some plans like that.
Great question. Any other questions? Well, again, no need to stick around. If you have no questions, our emails are on the website. Feel free to reach out. And again, we look forward to seeing a coaching appointment come up and talking to you more about exploring consulting in tech.
Yeah. Thank you all for attending. We miss you all. We hope to see you in person in the fall. And yeah, please do reach out as questions pop up.
Yep.